She arrived at the wedding feeling a strange mix of excitement and nervousness. The streets were crowded with cars, honking and moving slowly, but inside her mind, everything felt quiet, almost frozen. She had been looking forward to this day in some ways because it was her sister's wedding, a big celebration that the whole family had been planning for months. But now that she was here, dressed in a soft, pale-colored dress and shoes that pinched a little, she realized that excitement was quickly being replaced by a familiar knot of anxiety. Walking into the wedding hall, she paused for a moment at the entrance. The place looked beautiful. Flowers lined the aisles, soft lights hung from the ceiling, and the scent of fresh roses mixed with the aroma of cooked food. Guests were laughing, chatting, and taking pictures. Her heart thumped, but not in a happy way. She noticed the way some people glanced at her and then looked away, subtle smiles that felt more like judgments. She tried to shake it off and forced a small smile, but the feeling of being watched made her stiffen. As she made her way to her assigned seat, the reality of the situation became painfully clear. She was alone. The table where she was supposed to sit had a single chair waiting for her. Around her, couples and groups of friends were already settled, chatting comfortably, laughing at shared memories. She tried to tell herself it didn't matter, that she could enjoy the wedding on her own, but her stomach tightened. She remembered the many times in family gatherings when she had felt overlooked, when conversations skipped over her, or when her achievements were quietly compared to her sister's. This wasn't new, but today it stung more than ever. She adjusted her dress and sat down slowly, trying not to draw attention. Her sister passed by, glowing in her wedding dress, surrounded by bridesmaids who were laughing and adjusting each other's hair. Her sister waved and smiled warmly, but there was a hint of hurry in her eyes as she moved on. She wanted to speak, to tell her sister how proud she was, how happy she felt for her. But the words seemed small compared to the grandeur of the moment. Instead, she sat quietly, clenching her hands in her lap, trying to appear calm. Time passed slowly. The ceremony began and everyone rose for the bride and groom. The music played, and she watched as her sister walked down the aisle hand in hand with her father. There were tears in the eyes of some guests, smiles on others, but she felt like she was watching from behind a glass wall. The happiness around her felt distant, almost unreachable. She wanted to celebrate, to be part of the joy, but the loneliness clung to her, whispering that she didn't belong here in the way everyone else did. She tried to distract herself by looking around. The decorations were intricate, delicate patterns on the walls, glowing candles on every table. The chandelier sparkled like a cascade of diamonds above the dance floor. Guests mingled, took photos, and complimented each other's outfits. Despite the beauty, her attention kept returning to her own empty chair, the quiet gap beside her. She could see families sitting together, laughing at inside jokes and couples holding hands. Every smile, every shared look reminded her that she was alone in this sea of togetherness. Her mind wandered to memories of past family events. She remembered childhood birthdays where her sister had been the center of attention, the way relatives praised her sister's accomplishments, and the subtle comparisons that always made her feel less. She had learned to hide her disappointment, to smile politely, but inside she often felt invisible. Today, all those feelings had returned, magnified by the grandeur of the wedding. It wasn't just about being alone. It was about the long-standing pattern of being overlooked, the feeling that her presence didn't really matter in the bigger picture. A waiter came by with a tray of drinks. She took a glass of sparkling water and smiled politely. He gave a kind nod, and for a moment she felt seen by someone who didn't have expectations or judgments. But the moment passed quickly, and she was left staring at the glass, thinking about how easy it was for others to be celebrated while she remained in the shadows. She wanted to reach out to someone, to start a conversation, but every attempt felt awkward, like she was imposing on people who were already comfortably connected. The ceremony continued, and she watched as vows were exchanged. Her sister's voice trembled slightly, and the groom looked deeply into her eyes. Guests wiped tears from their cheeks, some laughed softly at shared anecdotes, and the energy in the room was warm and vibrant. She clapped politely at the right moments, but her heart wasn't in it. She wanted to feel joy, to celebrate this new chapter, but the weight of her isolation pressed down on her chest. She felt small, like a shadow moving along the edges of a bright light. After the ceremony, everyone moved to the reception area. Music played softly in the background, and tables were set with beautifully arranged flowers, plates of food, and sparkling glasses. She followed the crowd, clutching her purse a little too tightly, unsure where to go or who to speak to. She noticed groups of people laughing, exchanging compliments, and taking photos. The laughter felt like it was coming from another world, distant and unreachable. She tried to smile at familiar faces, but the smiles returned were polite and fleeting, never lasting long enough to feel real. She found her seat and sat down again, hoping to blend in. The table was elegantly decorated, but the emptiness next to her was glaring. She looked around, wondering if anyone had noticed her solitude. Some guests were absorbed in their conversations, others were on their phones, and a few glanced her way briefly before looking away. The subtle signals reminded her that she was alone, not by choice but by circumstance and perhaps by unspoken family dynamics. As dinner was served, she picked at her food without much appetite. The flavors were rich and delicious, but her mind was elsewhere, tangled in thoughts of loneliness and self-doubt. She wondered if she should have asked someone to sit with her, if she should have reached out earlier, but pride and hesitation kept her silent. She ate slowly, watching the interaction around her, observing how easily people connected, how naturally laughter flowed. Every cheerful exchange felt like a reminder that she was on the outside looking in. She tried to catch glimpses of her sister and the groom, hoping to share a moment, a smile, a laugh. Her sister passed by once, radiant and busy, and their eyes met for a brief moment. There was love in that glance, but also distraction, a sense that there was too much to do to stop and truly connect. She felt a pang of longing for that simple shared moment of attention, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. The evening wore on, and the music grew louder. Guests moved to the dance floor, couples swaying together, friends forming circles of laughter. She watched them, her heart aching for connection. She wanted to be part of it, to let herself enjoy the celebration, but the fear of awkwardness held her back. She felt frozen, caught between wanting to join in and the certainty that she would feel out of place. At one point, a small child ran past her, giggling and tugging at her parent's hand. She smiled genuinely at the child, and the child smiled back. That tiny exchange brought a flicker of warmth to her heart. For a brief moment, she felt part of the scene, connected to the simple joy of the moment, but as quickly as it came, the feeling faded, replaced by the heavier awareness of her isolation. She thought about leaving early, about finding a quiet corner and stepping out into the cool night air. The thought tempted her, promising relief from the constant reminder of being alone. But she stayed, telling herself that she had come for her sister, that she owed it to herself to witness this important day. She sat up straighter, adjusted her dress, and tried to breathe through the discomfort, trying to find some peace in the beautiful chaos around her. As the speeches began, she listened politely. Stories about her sister's childhood, funny anecdotes, and heartfelt wishes for the future filled the room. She laughed at the appropriate moments, clapped when expected, but the sense of being on the sidelines persisted. Every compliment for her sister felt like a quiet reminder of her own invisibility. She wanted to be happy, she really did, but happiness felt complicated when it was paired with such acute awareness of being alone. She scanned the room for anyone who might be similarly alone, anyone who might understand. Most tables were filled with familiar faces, friends laughing comfortably, families sharing memories. She felt the weight of comparison pressing down, the subtle sense that she had been overlooked yet again. Her thoughts spiraled briefly, imagining how much easier it would have been if someone had noticed her before she became invisible, if someone had simply extended a hand or a smile with genuine intention. As the evening moved forward, she tried to focus on small details, the way the candlelight danced on the glasses, the subtle fragrance of flowers, the gentle hum of conversations. She told herself to find joy in these tiny things, but the awareness of being alone made every attempt feel like a fragile, temporary distraction. She sipped her water, forced to smile, and tried to sit tall, reminding herself that she had the right to be there, even if it didn't feel that way. Hours passed and the reception continued. She watched the bride and groom on the dance floor, surrounded by friends and family, their happiness shining bright. She clapped and smiled, genuinely wishing them well, but her chest felt heavy with the quiet ache of solitude. She wanted connection, wanted someone to share a laugh or a dance with, but the thought of approaching anyone felt impossible. The fear of rejection, of awkwardness held her still, keeping her rooted to her chair. In those long moments of silence and observation, she realized something. Despite the loneliness, despite feeling invisible, she had endured. She had come, sat through the ceremony, witnessed her sister's joy, and stayed for the reception. There was a quiet strength in that, a reminder that even when she felt overlooked, she could remain present. She didn't yet know how the evening might change, but she felt a small growing sense of hope, a fragile belief that connection could still come, even when it seemed impossible. The night continued with music, laughter, and dancing. She watched, waited, and hoped quietly, her heart holding on to the possibility that something unexpected might happen. She didn't know who might notice her, who might offer her a simple gesture of companionship, but she remained open, letting herself breathe in the atmosphere, letting herself exist fully in the moment despite the loneliness that lingered around her. She sat alone, yes, but she also sat with a readiness for change, an openness to the kindness that could appear when least expected. And as she looked around the room, she realized that even in moments of isolation, there was a chance for connection, a chance for the night to shift, and a chance for someone to step into her quiet world and remind her that she was not invisible after all. As she sat quietly, she continued to watch the room, trying to find a way to escape the loneliness that pressed down on her. The laughter, the music, and the chatter of happy guests surrounded her, but each sound seemed to emphasize her isolation. She sipped her drink slowly, hoping that the cool liquid would distract her from the ache in her chest. Just as she was resigning herself to another long, silent hour, a shadow appeared beside her. She looked up to see a man, someone she had not noticed before, standing with a gentle smile. He had a kind face, warm eyes, and the kind of calm energy that seemed to make the room slightly softer around him. He didn't immediately speak, but just looked at her with a friendly, open expression. She felt a little startled, unsure whether to smile or stay withdrawn. Then he leaned slightly toward her and spoke in a low, easy tone that immediately felt comforting. "Hey, I noticed you're sitting alone. How about we pretend we're together for the evening?" The suggestion was simple, almost playful, but in that moment it felt like a lifeline. She blinked, surprised. No one had ever offered such an easy way to feel included without judgment. She hesitated. It was such an unusual offer. Pretend for a stranger? But there was something in his eyes that made her trust him without knowing why. She nodded slowly, almost sheepishly. "Okay," she whispered. He smiled wider, the kind of smile that made her feel immediately lighter, like a small weight had been lifted off her shoulders. He pulled out the chair next to him, gesturing for her to sit comfortably, and she did. For the first time that evening, she felt a subtle shift inside her. She was no longer just an observer of happiness. She had a presence, a temporary partnership that made her feel safe in the crowd. They began talking quietly, introducing themselves with casual ease. He asked about her family, the wedding, and lightly about her work. She answered, initially with small, careful words, but gradually, as he listened and responded with interest and warmth, she found herself opening up more than she had in a long time. He didn't rush her. He didn't interrupt or talk over her. He simply listened, nodding occasionally, smiling at the right moments. She realized that she had forgotten what it felt like to be heard without judgment. The conversation was easy, natural, and slowly began to draw her out of the shell she had wrapped herself in at the beginning of the night. Laughter started to bubble up. Quiet at first, then a little louder as they shared small, humorous stories from their lives. He told her about his child, the everyday chaos and joy of raising a little one alone, the pride he felt in small victories, and the little mishaps that made life unpredictable but meaningful. She found herself smiling genuinely, feeling a warmth that she hadn't expected to feel that night. In return, she shared parts of her life, her insecurities, the feeling of being overlooked, the way she often felt like a shadow when compared to others. She was surprised at how easily the words came. There was no pity in his eyes, no awkward hesitation, only a sense of understanding that made her feel valued. He didn't offer empty sympathy. He simply recognized her, the way someone does when they truly see another human being. Their small talk turned into shared laughter as they recalled childhood memories and funny incidents from past family events. She noticed how he had a way of speaking that drew her in without effort, the kind of voice that made the room feel smaller and more intimate even in the middle of a crowded reception. She felt herself relaxing, her shoulders loosening, her chest not as tight as it had been for hours. The loneliness that had pressed down so heavily at the start of the evening seemed to recede, replaced by a sense of companionship, even if it was temporary and playful. As they talked, she noticed other guests glancing their way. Some assumed they were a couple, and a few smiled knowingly. That little assumption made her feel included in a way that had been missing all night. For the first time, she could move her eyes around the room without that uncomfortable pang of isolation. She laughed more freely, sipped her drink without self-consciousness, and even gestured at something amusing one of the servers had done. The room didn't feel as intimidating anymore. It felt possible to be part of it if only she had someone like him at her side. He noticed the change too and commented gently, "See, it's not so bad when someone's with you." She laughed softly, feeling a bit embarrassed but happy. "I guess you're right," she replied. For the first time that evening, she felt that maybe she could enjoy the wedding without feeling small, without feeling like she didn't belong. There was a simple comfort in pretending, in the small act of having someone next to her, someone who made the world seem less harsh, less isolating. Time passed quickly in their conversation. They talked about hobbies, about funny misunderstandings at work, and about the little things in life that make people human. She told him about the little things she loved but rarely shared, the books she kept on her shelf, the quiet walks she took, the way she liked to watch sunsets without anyone noticing. He listened with curiosity, sometimes nodding, sometimes laughing softly, but always in a way that made her feel that her words mattered. She realized how starved she had been for this simple act of recognition, for someone to see her without judging or comparing. At one point, a group of guests passed by, exchanging greetings with them. He included her naturally in the conversation, asking for her opinions, laughing at her jokes. She felt a flutter of gratitude. She hadn't expected to feel included so quickly, and yet it felt effortless with him. The loneliness, which had seemed permanent, began to feel like something temporary, something that could be softened with a little human kindness. They decided to take a small walk around the reception area, pretending to look for a quiet spot to talk, though the entire wedding hall was lively and full of energy. As they moved, she realized she was laughing more than she had in a long time. The awkwardness that had shadowed her all evening was fading. She felt visible in a way that wasn't tied to her sister, her family, or her past feelings of inadequacy. She felt seen simply for being herself. During their walk, he told a story about a time when his child had tried to make breakfast alone and ended up with flour everywhere. She laughed heartily, almost spilling her drink, and he laughed with her. Not at her, but with her. That simple sharing of humor, the mutual recognition of life's imperfections, created a bond that neither of them expected at the start of the evening. She felt lighter, freer, and oddly grateful for the situation that had brought them together. They returned to their seats, and she noticed that the music had shifted to a slower, softer tune. Guests began to move to the dance floor, couples swaying in each other's arms. She looked down, hesitating, thinking about how awkward it would feel to join in. He noticed and gently offered his hand. "Come on, let's dance just for a bit. No one has to notice us, but we can enjoy it together." She hesitated for a moment, but finally took his hand. The warmth of his palm, the easy confidence in his guidance, made her heart flutter with a combination of nerves and excitement. As they danced, even in the gentle, slow rhythm, she felt a surprising connection to the moment. She could laugh at herself without fear, move without self-consciousness, and let the music guide her without thinking about the chairs, the empty spaces, or the judgment she had imagined. For a few precious minutes, she was not alone. She was simply part of a small, shared world with someone who had chosen to include her. As the song ended, they returned to their seats, and she felt a warmth lingering inside her chest. She realized that what had started as a simple act, a stranger suggesting they pretend to be together, had blossomed into something unexpectedly meaningful. She felt a sense of belonging, not in the larger crowd, but in the small bubble of shared understanding and kindness that had grown around her. It reminded her that sometimes a single act of recognition can shift an entire evening, and maybe even her view of herself. The night continued, and she noticed how her energy had shifted. She smiled more easily, laughed freely, and even engaged with nearby guests in small talk. Her presence felt lighter, more confident, more genuine. She no longer felt the crushing weight of being invisible. Instead, she had a sense of agency, a subtle understanding that she could navigate this event and find moments of connection, even in a room full of people who seemed effortlessly together. As the evening drew on, she kept glancing at the man beside her, grateful for his simple yet profound gesture. He had not needed to fix anything, to solve her loneliness or to change her circumstances. He had simply noticed her, offered companionship, and created space for her to feel comfortable in a moment where she had felt anything but. That quiet act of kindness left a mark, a reminder that human connection often comes in unexpected ways and can transform moments of isolation into experiences of shared joy. By the end of the night, she realized that she had spent hours laughing, talking, and sharing small stories that mattered. The wedding, which had begun as a reminder of her solitude, had become an evening filled with warmth, friendship, and newfound hope. She understood that the world might not always notice her immediately, but sometimes it only takes one person to extend a hand, a smile, or an offer of companionship to change everything. And as she left the reception, she carried that quiet, glowing reminder with her, knowing that even in the loneliest of moments, connection can appear when least expected. As the evening moved forward, the room continued to hum with laughter, conversation, and music. She noticed that her heart no longer felt heavy, and the sense of isolation that had been so constant at the beginning of the night was slowly fading. Sitting beside the single dad, she realized that the connection they had formed was more than just a temporary distraction. It was a comforting anchor in the midst of the wedding's whirlwind. They shared quiet jokes and small smiles that made her feel lighter, like the weight of the day was lifting bit by bit. He was easy to talk to. Every story he told, every laugh he shared, drew her in deeper, making her forget the awkwardness she had felt at the start. She shared more of herself, things she rarely mentioned, like the books she loved, her small hobbies, and the quiet moments she cherished alone. He listened attentively, occasionally asking questions that made her feel seen, truly heard for the first time that night. In his presence, her thoughts became lighter, her worries less pressing. She realized how rare it was to meet someone who made it easy to be herself without the fear of judgment. They talked about the wedding itself, sharing observations about the decorations, the food, and the way different family members interacted. He laughed with her at the small mishaps he noticed, a napkin falling, a child spilling juice, and she found herself laughing freely without concern for what others might think. The sound of her own laughter felt strange but liberating, a gentle reminder that joy could exist even in moments she had feared would be painful. She began to relax completely, allowing herself to be in the present without overthinking. At one point, he suggested they step outside for a few minutes to catch some fresh air. They moved to a small balcony overlooking a quiet garden lit with soft lights. The cool evening breeze brushed against her skin, and she felt a wave of calm wash over her. The noise of the reception faded slightly in the background, and for a moment it was just the two of them. He leaned against the railing casually, and she felt the ease of simply being near someone who offered support without expectation. She realized how comforting it was to share a quiet moment amidst the bustling wedding. They began to share stories about their pasts. He spoke about the challenges of being a single parent, the small victories, and the unexpected joys that came with raising a child alone. She listened intently, fascinated by the way he framed difficulties with humor and resilience. In turn, she opened up about moments in her life where she had felt overlooked or left behind, the way family gatherings often made her feel invisible. She found solace in his empathy, in the way he never dismissed her feelings but instead validated them without pity. The shared vulnerability created a bond that neither of them had anticipated at the beginning of the night. As they returned to the reception area, she noticed the energy of the room had shifted slightly. Guests were moving more freely, some dancing, others mingling in lively conversations. The act of having someone beside her made the space feel less intimidating. She smiled at a few familiar faces, and they smiled back, sensing her newfound ease. She realized that her confidence was returning, not because the room had changed, but because she had someone who made her feel supported and visible. The presence of the single dad beside her had transformed the atmosphere, making her feel included and valued. Dinner continued, and they shared light conversation, commenting on the food and the speeches that had begun earlier. She noticed herself contributing more naturally to conversations, laughing freely when something was amusing, and nodding appreciatively when others spoke. For the first time that evening, she felt that she was not merely an observer, but an active participant in the celebration. The small act of having a companion had shifted her perspective completely, turning what could have been a lonely night into a shared experience filled with subtle joy and comfort. Later, the music changed to a lively tune and the dance floor began to fill. Couples and friends twirled, moved together, and shared laughter. She watched them for a moment, feeling the familiar pang of longing to join in. But this time it was tempered by the presence of someone who had already made the evening feel manageable. He noticed her hesitation and offered his hand with a warm smile. "Want to dance?" "Just for a few minutes," he said. She looked at him, feeling a flutter of nerves and excitement, and nodded. The simple gesture made her feel seen, included, and cared for in a way that words could not fully capture. As they moved on to the dance floor, she felt the music flow through her, guiding her movements. The rhythm was gentle and his hand was steady, offering reassurance without pressure. She laughed quietly when she stumbled slightly and he chuckled with her. Not at her, but with her. The moment was simple yet profound. It was a reminder that joy could be found in the small, unassuming moments, and that human connection could transform even an evening she had dreaded into something meaningful. After a few dances, they returned to their seats, both a little out of breath but smiling. She realized that her heart felt lighter than it had all evening. The tension, the discomfort, and the feeling of being overlooked had eased considerably. She felt a growing sense of gratitude for the unexpected presence of someone who had noticed her loneliness and extended a hand in such a thoughtful, non-intrusive way. The experience was subtle but powerful, a quiet lesson in how small gestures of kindness could change the course of a night, and even the way someone felt about themselves. They continued to talk, sharing stories about small joys and ordinary moments in life. She mentioned the books she loved, the quiet walks she enjoyed, and the moments of solitude that she treasured. He listened with genuine interest, occasionally asking questions that made her feel important and acknowledged. She realized that being seen, truly seen, was a rare gift, and she appreciated the simple humanity in his attentiveness. It was a reminder that connection did not always need grand gestures. It could exist in conversation, in shared laughter, and in the quiet acknowledgement of each other's presence. As the night deepened, she noticed the reception beginning to wind down. Guests were slowly leaving, saying their goodbyes and expressing gratitude for the celebration. She felt a mix of relief and sadness. Relief because the evening had been challenging, but sadness because she knew the comfort of companionship she had experienced would soon end. She glanced at the single dad beside her, grateful for the hours they had shared, and recognized that this simple, fleeting connection had left a lasting impact on her sense of self and her outlook on human kindness. He smiled at her gently, noticing the pensive expression on her face. "You did well tonight," he said. "I know it wasn't easy, but you made it through and you even enjoyed yourself." She nodded, feeling the truth in his words. It had not been easy, but the presence of someone who offered understanding, patience, and quiet encouragement had made the difference. She realized that while the evening had started with a heavy sense of loneliness, it had transformed into an experience filled with connection, laughter, and unexpected comfort. She thought about how often life placed people in situations where they felt isolated, invisible, or overlooked, and yet she understood that sometimes it only took one person noticing, one person offering companionship or kindness, to change the entire experience. The single dad beside her had done just that. He had acknowledged her existence, invited her into a shared moment, and helped her reclaim her space in a world that had felt daunting and cold just hours earlier. The music slowed again, and some guests returned to the dance floor for a few last dances. She watched, smiling, feeling a gentle sense of peace. She understood now that being present in the moment, allowing herself to feel, laugh, and engage, was a small but significant act of courage. She had faced the challenge of being alone in a room full of people, and had discovered that human connection could appear unexpectedly, offering warmth, understanding, and inclusion. As the reception finally began to close, she felt a quiet contentment settle over her. The evening had been far from perfect, and moments of discomfort had been inevitable, but the kindness and presence of one person had transformed it. She realized that the night was not about grandeur or attention. It was about small moments of connection, genuine laughter, and the acknowledgement of one another's humanity. She left the dance floor feeling stronger, lighter and more capable of facing similar challenges in the future. Walking back toward the main hall, she reflected on the lessons of the evening. She understood that life would continue to place her in moments of discomfort or isolation, but she now carried the memory of being seen, of being accompanied, and of sharing simple joys with someone who cared enough to notice. The experience gave her hope, not just for unexpected companionship, but for the possibility of finding connection in the ordinary and the everyday. Sitting back at her table for a final moment before leaving, she looked around once more. Guests were saying their goodbyes, families hugging, and couples sharing last dances. She felt a sense of gratitude for having witnessed her sister's happiness and for having discovered that even in moments of profound loneliness, human connection could appear in gentle, unassuming ways. The single dad beside her offered a reassuring smile, one that said everything words could not capture. And in that simple exchange, she knew that the night had transformed not just her experience of the wedding, but her understanding of kindness, connection, and the quiet strength found in shared moments. The reception had settled into a gentle rhythm, with guests eating, chatting, and occasionally moving to the dance floor as soft music played. She sat beside the single dad, feeling the warmth of their connection that had grown steadily throughout the evening. The earlier tension and anxiety she had felt were now replaced with a quiet sense of ease. She laughed more freely, spoke with confidence, and noticed that the room no longer felt intimidating. His presence beside her had changed the way she experienced everything. The conversations, the laughter, even the music. He leaned slightly toward her, speaking in a low, kind voice that felt natural and unforced. "You've got a good sense of humor," he said, smiling. She laughed, a soft sound that seemed lighter than the laughs of the evening before. "I guess I've just learned to find it in little things," she replied. He nodded as if understanding exactly what she meant. For a moment, they simply enjoyed the quiet companionship, the kind of presence that didn't need to be filled with words. As they watched the guests around them, she began to notice details she had missed earlier. The way the flowers swayed in the soft breeze, the gentle flicker of candlelight on the tables, and the subtle smiles exchanged between family members. Each detail felt more vivid now, colored by the calm comfort of having someone beside her who made her feel included. She realized that her perspective had shifted entirely. The wedding, which had initially seemed overwhelming and isolating, now felt rich and engaging. He suggested they get up and take a short walk, just around the edges of the reception hall. The idea was simple, but it gave her a chance to stretch and move without the awkwardness she would have felt alone. As they walked, they shared stories about small personal victories and amusing incidents from their daily lives. She talked about moments of solitude she cherished, small successes at work, and the little habits that brought her joy. He responded with genuine interest, asking questions and sharing comparable experiences from his own life. The conversation was easy and natural, flowing without effort or pretense. They paused near a small, decorated corner of the hall where lights were softer and the space felt a little more private. He turned toward her and said, "I know it might feel strange to be at a wedding alone, but you've handled it really well." She felt a wave of gratitude and warmth at his words, a validation she hadn't expected but deeply appreciated. She nodded, realizing that simply being recognized for her courage made a difference. Her earlier fears of being invisible or awkward were now tempered by the simple acknowledgement of someone who had seen her struggle and supported her. As they returned to the main area, the music shifted to a slow romantic tune. Couples moved to the dance floor, swaying gently in each other's arms. She glanced down, feeling a flicker of hesitation. Dancing alone or trying to join others would have been intimidating. But he noticed her glance and offered his hand with a reassuring smile. "Come on, just a few steps, nothing serious," he said. Her chest fluttered with a mix of nervousness and anticipation as she took his hand. The simple act of holding it provided comfort, giving her courage to step onto the dance floor. They moved together, guided by the music. The rhythm was soft and the movement felt natural. She laughed quietly when she misstepped, and he chuckled with her, not at her but alongside her. The moment, simple as it was, brought her a sense of joy and connection she hadn't anticipated. It was a reminder that sometimes happiness can be found in small shared moments, and that human connection has the power to transform even an evening she had dreaded into a space of comfort and lightness. As they returned to their table, slightly breathless but smiling, she noticed how much more comfortable she felt. The presence of the single dad had changed the way she experienced the room, the wedding, and even herself. She felt visible and acknowledged, and that sense of recognition allowed her to engage more fully with the surroundings. The loneliness that had pressed heavily at the beginning of the night now seemed distant, replaced by warmth and a subtle confidence that she hadn't expected to find. They continued to share stories about their lives, discussing everyday challenges and small victories. She talked about the times she had felt overlooked in family gatherings and the quiet efforts she made to remain unnoticed in social settings. He listened with attentiveness, sometimes nodding, sometimes laughing softly, but always in a way that made her feel that her experiences mattered. The shared understanding created a quiet bond, an unspoken reassurance that someone could truly see her and accept her for who she was. During the evening, they noticed a small group of children gathered near the edge of the dance floor, playing quietly with balloons and small toys. She smiled watching them, and he commented on the innocence and joy that children brought into a space. They shared memories of their own experiences with kids, both serious and humorous, and she found herself laughing more freely than she had at the start of the evening. Each story, each shared observation, strengthened the sense of connection and made the wedding feel like a shared journey rather than a place of isolation. At one point, he leaned closer and whispered something amusing about a minor mishap at another table. She laughed quietly, feeling a warmth spread through her chest. It was a subtle, ordinary moment, yet it carried the weight of human kindness and companionship. She realized that the evening was not just about the wedding itself, but about the moments of shared understanding and the small gestures that made her feel included. In his presence, she experienced a simple but profound comfort, one that lifted the heaviness she had carried for hours. As the night progressed, she noticed that her energy had shifted significantly. She engaged more with nearby guests, participating in light conversations and sharing smiles and laughter. The single dad beside her offered gentle guidance, encouragement, and reassurance, making her feel that she could navigate social interactions with ease. The presence of someone who noticed and cared allowed her to move beyond self-consciousness and embrace the evening with openness and authenticity. The music shifted again, and a more lively tune began to play. Guests returned to the dance floor, moving with energy and enthusiasm. She watched, smiling at their joy, and felt a flicker of desire to join in. He noticed her glance and gently offered his hand once more, inviting her to dance. This time she moved with confidence, guided by the rhythm and by his steady presence. The movement, laughter, and shared energy of the dance floor created a sense of inclusion and camaraderie she had not felt earlier. As the evening drew closer to its conclusion, she reflected on the transformation that had taken place. The night, which had begun with anxiety, loneliness, and a sense of being overlooked, had become an experience filled with laughter, connection, and comfort. The presence of the single dad had been the catalyst. His simple act of noticing and offering companionship,